The Lost Boys, The Tribe. A while back, I got The Lost Boys on 4K. That was last month, and I said I would review the Lost Boys sequels, and I hadn't got around to doing that. And I do need to watch them before the month's over because these kind of feel like October type movies. You know, more horror focused, that type of thing. So I expect reviews of the third one in the next couple days. But yeah, I do have a review of the Lost Boys, the first one. I did not like this sequel. Um, I so these are so if you don't know about the Lost Boys sequels, it's for good reason. Not only are they not great movies, I haven't seen the third one, but I can't imagine that one's much different. Basically, these movies are direct-to-video sequels of the Lost Boys. Uh, there's some backstory. I don't really know the details where they couldn't get one of the Corys to be in a lot of one of them, but they just you watch this and it doesn't feel like the Lost Boys. Um, and they're very cheap because they are direct to videos. They are under a division of Warner Brothers called Warner Premiere or something like that, which is kind of similar to Universal has a similar label. I forget what it's called, where they make sequels to some of Universal's bigger selling titles. Like for example, the new Monsters movie was under that label. The Tremor sequels are under that label. The Scorpion King, that type of stuff, come from that side of Universal. And this is kind of like that. Now, that's not to say everything they've done has been terrible. They actually are responsible for Trick or Treat. So, there you go. Um, but this movie was not good. And I think the first thing I noticed about this movie is it definitely earned the R rating more than the first one did. Like, but this movie was also like you starts off with this vampire scene, and the editing was atrocious and really bad. The effects were not great, and it just didn't feel like the same vampire element the first one. I think what's annoying about this movie is it has no style to it. Joel Schumacher's directing of that first Lost Boys, in terms of the color, in terms of the direction, in terms of all that, amazing for what it really adds and brings this unique style and presence to this movie. So even if you don't like that movie, you can kind of appreciate that here. Here it's just very boring. The performances are very boring. The dialogue is really, really bad at points. It's just lame. Like you're just sitting here like, this is just very cliche and bad. And there's not that fun vampire element. And it doesn't feel like the 80s. You watch The Lost Boys, and it just feels like 1980. Like, in terms of the music, everything about it. And that part of that, obviously, is the fact that it was made in the 80s. But I just mean, like, it really is a movie like Space Jam, for example. Space Jam is a very good just encapsulation of the 90s. Michael Jordan was huge. The soundtrack, all that stuff. Just in the same way, in the 80s, the Corys were huge. And the music in that movie was huge. Things like that. It just feels very much of the time, and it works and adds to that movie. That is not felt here. It is just a boring movie that is so blandly directed, poorly, just lame effects, lame vampire scenes, nothing great. Dialogue's bad and just cliche, and just the acting isn't great either. It's just like, who really wanted this movie? I mean, because Warner Brothers right now could make a really good Lost Boys sequel, and I would eat that shit up. I would be glad. Um, I hope that that's something they invest in. I've heard stuff of a Lost Boys remake. I think that's dumb, but I think that the reason why is just it's hard to get the Corys involved. Did one of them pass away? I'd have to look that up. I don't actually know all the details. Someone who's more informed with this stuff could actually let me know down in the comments. I'm really just here to talk about this movie, and I did not like it. And I was kind of like, there are sequels that you're like, why does no one talk about these this movie. I've never heard of this. I didn't know this existed. And then you watch it and you're like, oh, that's why. So, I'm excited to watch the third one and see how that one is and see if it's any better. I doubt it will be, but I'm just curious.